All right, here we go. Here we are 3 weeks and 3 days away from the first round of the 2021 National Football League Draft. And this is Jonesing for Football. Bill Jones along with Cody Winstead. And wow, things are really starting to happen as far as the rumor mill is concerned with this draft. And as far as people figuring out who these players are after a COVID year, young Cody, I think that the information cycle has been slow getting started without a combine a month or so ago that normally gets us going as far as just how fast these guys are, how explosive these guys really are. Do the measurables match up with the tape? We're having to reverse it this year. And so I think it's a very exciting time for the next 3 weeks leading up to the draft because we are getting more and more information on these players, and we can dive in to see who let me show it to you, the true 5-star players are in the Big Green NFL Draft Scouting Notebook. How you doing, Cody?
Hey, good to be here. Good to do another podcast with you, Bill Jones. I'm with you. It's like normally you take a couple weeks after the Super Bowl, and then we have the combine, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's right into draft. This week or this year, instead of having them all the times coming in at once, we're getting them over like a month span. So this week we got Tulsa, we got Minnesota, we got Oklahoma State. We're still getting times for really highly rated prospects. And so I think it's taken the media a long time to get into kind of the mode of ramping up and figuring out who everyone is. And but it's here. We've been doing it for multiple weeks now. I've been studying the quarterbacks right after the season. But even I'm still learning some of these second round, third round, fourth round guys where in most years I would have had that done over the last month, but I'm just getting to it now.
And of course, Alabama had a second pro day this past Tuesday. Ohio State had a pro day the same day. Cowboys head coach, and I'm based here in Dallas, of course, with CBS 11 in Dallas and host the Mike McCarthy show. Cody is in Philadelphia. You went to the Minnesota Pro Day this past week in your role with the NFL Network, but Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys head coach, he was at the Ohio State Pro Day. And so I'm sitting here and I was asking you, being an Ohio State guy, all right, who is McCarthy watching at the Ohio State Pro Day? There's a couple of offensive linemen. Baron Browning, a linebacker from right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Kennedale, put up some very nice numbers. And I look at him as a guy that he might have been checking out. And so we in the media we're looking at where coaches are going even more so than in the past because there's limited, they're doing all of their interviews via virtual interviews this year, and they aren't having the private workouts because of the COVID protocols and so forth. And so when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch show up at the Alabama Pro Day and they watch Mac Jones, a second pro day for Mac Jones, and then there's the rumor mill churning that the reason that San Francisco actually spent all of that capital to move up to number 3 from number 12 to get a quarterback. It wasn't Justin Fields. It wasn't Trey Lance. It's not Zach Wilson if he fell there and the Jets passed on him at number 2. It's Mac Jones. Are you believing this stuff, Cody?
Leading up to the draft, we know it's rumor central, and who's actually telling the truth. If you can figure that out, you probably should win an award. But I would say this. I'm not buying Mac Jones at number 3, even though it is interesting that the 49ers would be there for his second pro day instead of going to watch Justin Fields for his only pro day. To me, Mac Jones, when I watch him, and I've watched a handful of games, I never saw him do anything very hard. Everything was very controlled for him. He's in the pocket. He makes great reads, to be fair to him. But I never saw him have to escape and throw on the run. Throwing in really tight windows, not a huge thing for him because he's got first-round receivers all over the place. He's got one of the best offensive lines. in the country as well. And so the NFL is all about how do you perform when things get tough, when they blitz you all the time. You have a banged up offensive line. Can you make tough throws on third down? And Mac Jones, I never really saw that. And to me, I'm not sure he can actually do that given the athlete that he is. And comparing him to Justin Fields, Fields made a ton of good throws and tough plays while at Ohio State. I just think they're two completely different athletes and quarterback. I would go with Fields. I'm interested to hear your take.
Well, and by the way, we're going to get into running backs here in a moment. We're not going to dwell on the quarterbacks, but I do think it's interesting, and it's led me to start digging into Mac Jones, what he's all about more, because I was just reading the media draft analyst tea leaves. It appeared that Mac Jones was the 5th quarterback on most people's boards, but I mean, we see it so much every year, or not every year, but every other year, let's say, where there is a quarterback who goes higher than people at first projected. Mitchell Trubisky was one in Chicago, Daniel Jones, the Giants. I go back to Blake Bortles. He was another one where actually leading up to draft day, people were not necessarily speculating that Jacksonville would take him. And so we don't, to your point on, if an NFL executive's lips are moving, then this time of the year, then he's lying. We're not able to read those lips. They got masks on.
That's right. That's right.
And so we don't know what they're thinking, And so, but what we can read is the fact that, okay, he had a choice to make there. Mac Jones had 2 pro days, and San Francisco's at both of those, and Shanahan doesn't go to the Ohio State Pro Day the same day. My question for you on Mac Jones, when you just look at the season that Mac Jones had last year, which was phenomenal numbers, it was comparable to what Joe Burrow did the year before at LSU. And and their careers are comparable. Of course, Burrow was a guy who started his career at Ohio State, transferred to LSU, didn't do a lot his first year as a starter, and then came back with perhaps the greatest season in college football history that a quarterback has had. And Mac Jones wasn't far off that last year at Alabama. And of course, with great wide receivers, just like Burrow had the year before. So does John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan look at Mac Jones as they think that, okay, well, this is who they've assessed as Joe Burrow coming out of this draft, who was the number 1 pick to Cincinnati last year?
Yeah, I mean that could be true. I look at the comparison. If we're comparing Burrow to Mac Jones, I think Burrow is a significantly better athlete than Mac, and that makes all the difference. If you go watch Cincinnati, the Bengals this year, Burrow, one of the most impressive things he did was being able to move in the pocket, get away from pressure, and make some incredible throws on the run. We mentioned
did we have to see that, or did we see that from Burrow his last year at LSU so much?
I think 100%. I mean, he was a highlight reel at LSU. To me, for Mac Jones, nothing's been difficult for him. He really had a tailor-made. I mean, you can't put a quarterback in a better position. Steve Sarkisian was a genius this year. And I saw, as an Ohio State guy, the only example I needed to see was the title game when Steve Sarkisian literally won the national championship game by himself, out scheming Ohio State. And
Joe Brady was a genius the year before and got the offensive coordinator job at the Carolina Panthers because
fair point. But just the way that they were drawing up plays in the title game that I'd never really seen before. And Devontae Smith touching the ball. I mean, he's just he's a home run hitter every time he gets it. Waddle, he had Najee Harris. Again, I mentioned the offensive line. To me, Mac Jones, I don't know, man. I would not take that high in comparison to Fields. Trust me, Fields can play anywhere. And he went to Georgia, and he would have been a good player. And then he came to Ohio State. And from day one at Ohio State, he was the man on campus. And that's hard to do when you're not in a recruiting class necessarily. but from day one, you can tell just from the interviews, from the videos they post online, from the games. The minute Justin Fields stepped on campus at Ohio State, he was the dude. And that's hard to do at a major program like Ohio State or Alabama or, you name top program.
All right, let's get into running backs. It appears that the top two running backs on most boards, top two running backs would be from Clemson, Travis Etienne, from Alabama, Najee Harris, and just phenomenal numbers put up by both on teams that they played on national championship teams in their career at their respective schools. Najee Harris, as you know, and I know that you're going to get into him in a second. Even coming out of high school, you can't get any better than what Najee Harris was projected to do in college, and he lived up to the billing. Let me mention Travis Etienne off the top, though, where this is a guy who had his pro day ran a 4.41 with a 10.8 broad jump, which gets back to that explosion that you saw on the playing field at Clemson. The tape doesn't lie. The measurables measure up to it. And so Etienne, I think he's going to have a terrific career in the NFL. It kind of comes down to, in many ways, I think, what is, which kind of flavor of ice cream do you like? You like vanilla or chocolate ice cream, whatever, orange sherbet, whatever it is, there's a lot of people who will like the orange sherbet, the Clemson orange of Travis Etienne. And so he's the guy that's at the top of a lot of guys' boards that I've seen. Would he be at the top of yours?
I like him. To me, when I look at Etienne, I kind of feel like a little Alvin Kamara. Like, he is explosive in the pass game. Give him a little space, get him on the edge, and see you later. And he made Trevor Lawrence look really good a lot of times for Clemson over the last few years. Check downs, swing passes. Trevor's throwing it 5 yards and Etienne's running 50 for the score. And so, Kamara, I think, is a good comp for him. But my guy is Najee Harris. I think he's the top back. And if you're looking at combination of running the ball and receiving, I think it's clearly Harris. Bill Jones, every year I pick my favorite guy in the draft. You know that. Last year, it was Jalen Johnson, the corner from Utah, who I talked about every day. I was texting you every day. Check this play out. Check this guy out. And he was good. Picked in the second round by the Bears. Had a nice rookie year, by the way. And
so we should say, when you pick out your favorite player, it's not that you think that player is going to be the top pick in the draft, or maybe even a top 10 pick, or even a first round pick. This is a guy that you've just fallen in love with. But if you were drafting for a team, you would not take him necessarily. Like, if you had the 10th pick and the 44th pick, you wouldn't take Jalen Johnson with the 10th pick, but you would take him with the 44th pick because you know how other people are size him up.
Correct. I would say I would want to figure out how to get this guy on the team. Whether it's in the first round or the second round, you stated it well. It's not necessarily the best player, but my favorite player. Yeah. And this year, right now, we're still a few weeks away, but the leading candidate for my favorite player in the draft is Najee Harris, Alabama. Like I said, rare combination, size and speed. Could have went pro last year, returned to Alabama, and as you mentioned, it paid off pretty big for him. They won the national title, and he became the school's all-time leader in yards and touchdowns. How about that? Alabama, football factory, historic program, and no one has run the ball better at Alabama than Najee Harris. That includes Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, Sean Alexander, just to name a few backs in Tide history. He didn't do much at the Bama Pro Days. Did run some routes, though, in the second Pro Day to show his versatility and that he's a 3-down back. Says he can run any route that a receiver can run. And I've never heard a running back say this. He wants teams to know that he can be the first read on a quarterback's progression. I've never heard a running back say that, but I thought that was interesting. The dude's a stud on the field, obviously, clearly. But I like his personality. I think that's his real difference. It makes him a real difference maker. Like I mentioned, didn't participate in the first pro day, but this story got news. He drove 9 hours overnight to support his teammates when his flight from Dallas to Birmingham got canceled. And that was just to hang out with the guys, be there and support them. That's a dude I want on my team right there. And go listen to an interview with Najee Harris. I guarantee it takes you about 2 seconds, Bill Jones, to go, that dude's special. It's very easy. I've listened to about 20 of them in the last 2 weeks. And every time, that dude's special. So
I think you can learn a lot about a player from, I mean, even from our own homes, even in a pandemic, we can sit here and through the magic of YouTube, call up interviews with players, and you can find out a lot about their personalities, how they would fit into a locker room, how intelligent they are, all those quote unquote intangibles, which really become tangibles when they become a part of your team and become a leader on your team. And that I've gotten sold on players looking at that, and I've also gotten unsold on players looking at some of that stuff.
100%, 100%. And I don't sign my name to a player unless I see an interview. Like that's just part of it. It's just as important as the.
That's
49.
why the teams interview the players, and so us, we're at arm's length from a lot of these players, and so those can be our interviews, where it's our insight into what the teams are finding out about these players. You mentioned Derrick Henry, and at 6'2", 230 pounds, Najee Harris, a big back, and that is another thing that separates him, makes him a different type back than what Travis Etienne is, who measured 5'10", 205. And so I agree with you on the Kamara comparison there. But Najee Harris, because he went to Alabama, I really like Derrick Henry when he came out of Alabama. Obviously, he has performed at that same level in the NFL. But they're going into the draft, if you recall, the reason I think he was a third-round draft pick, that he was not a first-round draft pick. Obviously NFL teams and the mock drafters as well, they weren't as sold on Henry. Harris reminds me in some ways of Henry, and he reminds me of Henry as well in what he has done, not only in his career at Alabama, but also in high school. And Najee Harris in California, I mean, if you go look at what Derrick Henry did in high school in Florida, I mean, it is unbelievable. He was a beast. And Najee Harris was the same type running back in California, rushing for basically 2,500 yards and over 30 touchdowns every year, all 3 years at Antioch, California. There was a reason that I think his rivals and Scout had him as not just the number one running back in the country coming out of high school, but he was the number one overall recruit. And it was in unison. ESPN had him as the number 3 overall recruit coming out. 24/7 had him as a number 2 overall recruit. And that doesn't always translate, but in the case of Najee Harris and Derrick Henry, it translated.
Yep, for sure. Bill Jones, let me give you my win stat for this podcast.
Okay.
The win stat, which is just something cool, research, something I looked up. Hopefully you guys like it. In the last 10 drafts, only 13 running backs have been selected in the first round. And so I think Najee Harris deserves to be in that group. It looks like for most like mock drafts and projection wise, he's kind of that early to mid 20s. To me, I looked through all the teams. Maybe the Jets and the Steelers were 2 teams that stuck out to me where he could go there and have an immediate impact.
Oh, and he's going to have an immediate impact wherever he goes.
For sure.
The question is, do teams already have a Zeke Elliott? Do they already have a Derrick Henry where they're not going to be able to play him right off the bat? And the other thing with running backs is you want them to have an immediate impact, because the whole debate on whether you give a running back a second contract or not and pay him the big bucks. All right, let me throw another guy out that I like, and I love Najee Harris. And, I'll reserve judgment on who my favorite guys are in the draft until basically the week of the draft, because I'm getting a late start on studying all these guys. But I love everything that you've said about Najee Harris. Guy that I was looking at this week, though, running back Javonte Williams from North Carolina. And here's a guy that tested as well. Now he ran a 4.55, which is acceptable. It's not great, whatever. He's not the 4.41 of an ETN. 5'10", 212 pounds, 22 bench reps. Love that. And it shows on tape. I mean, this guy is a power guy who runs over people. He was a 36 vertical, 10.3 broad, 4.09 shuttle, and a 6.97 cone, which is good. He, at North Carolina, it was a tandem back situation with Michael Carter, who's also in this draft and is also highly regarded. Probably one of the top 5 running backs in this draft. Javonte Williams last year at North Carolina ran for 1,140 yards, averaging 7.3 yards per carry, and 19 touchdowns last year for the Tar Heels and Mac Brown. And what Mac Brown first mentions about Javonte Williams are his powerful legs, and you can really see it. I love his running style. A guy that was lightly recruited out of Wallace, North Carolina. And so he stayed at home with the Tar Heels, always wanted to be a Tar Heel, but had only one FBS offer coming out of high school. And this year at North Carolina, he did well last year as well, but I mean, he went over the top this year. And Javonte Williams, he is going to make an immediate impact to the NFL, and he finds the end zone. He ran over those ACC DBs, and he's going to run over some players in the NFL too. But I love his, he reminds me, just looking at him, as a more powerful Emmitt Smith. He's got the same kind of no-nonsense running style, finding a hole, and he's not a juker or a jiver or whatever, but he will hit that hole and he will gobble up yardage. And so Javonte Williams is my guy at the top, alongside Najee Harris, that I really like.
Yeah. I was thinking about those. The North Carolina had their pro day recently, and I was watching it on NFL Network. Shameless plug there. Anyway, I was thinking.
And by the way, Michael Carter averaged what? 8 yards a carry.
Right. And it got me thinking, like, hey, when's the last time one team had 2 like stud tailbacks like that? And then I was like, Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams. Remember them in the
Auburn.
same draft, if I'm not mistaken. Those 2 guys, both good players and high picks. And yeah, I thought that's interesting to get 2 stud backs like that. But that's what I was thinking about when I was watching their pro day.
All right, give me another guy.
Yep. Okay, here's my quick sleeper, Bill Jones, and I'll make it quick. Jared Patterson from Buffalo led the nation in rushing yards this past season, 178 per game. And that was after he went back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons in 2018 and 2019. Probably best known for his epic game against Kent State this past year, when he set a MAC record rushing for 409 yards and 8 touchdowns in one game. He's projected, though, Bill Jones, despite all this that I've already laid out, 5th or 6th round pick. Teams aren't quite sure about his size. Measured 5'6.5", weighed 195 at Buffalo's pro day, but he ran in the low 4.5s, which is, pretty solid. I think that was it quicker than most people anticipated. When I watched him on tape, no one caught him from behind, and he was ripping off long touchdown runs all the time. As I mentioned, 8 in one game against Kent State, but no one was catching him. When I watched him, it looked like a kind of a combination of more kind of Maurice Jones-Drew, shifty, good vision, and he's powerful. And so that was the guy that stuck out to me when I watched him play. You don't produce like this dude produced unless you're an elite worker. And go watch an interview with Jared Patterson. You'll figure it out. That's who he is. He was a 2-star recruit coming in. He just needed a chance. Buffalo gave him that chance, and it paid off great for the Bulls. I think whoever gives him a chance in the pros would have a nice player. And, maybe he's not an every down back. He's he could be a complimentary back, first and second down guy. But I like Jared Patterson as a sleeper at the tailback position.
Now, is he a guy that could also play in the slot? I mean, being a shorter guy, 5'6", 195, is he that type? Or you mentioned he's power. Is he a more between the tackles runner, even though he's only 5'6"?
Yeah, I would say no on the slot. I would say, yeah, he's more of a downhill runner type than he is like quick shifty. But again, he can make a difference. I think you give him some carries, and he's just going to work. He's going to outwork people. That's how he went from a 2-star player at Buffalo to 3,000-yard seasons. And again, became one of the best players in college football last year.
All right, I'll give you a sleeper guy. Another guy named Williams, my first guy, who is one of the top 3 or 4. Probably, I'd say, I would for sure have Javonte Williams in my top 3, along with Harris and Etienne. But here's another Williams who, and I haven't seen exactly. I'm sure he's third day, and he may be 6th or 7th round. But all I know is whenever I watched him play at Kansas, he was productive. Puka Williams is his name. He 5'9", only 175 pounds. And so that's not going to get you. So he's a satellite back in the NFL. But he ran a 4.38, and that'll get your attention in a hurry. What won't get your attention in a hurry and what makes him a satellite back are the 4 bench reps. But that aside, he's not in a strongest man competition. We want him to get to the end zone, and he got to the end zone a lot at Kansas, a team that doesn't get to the end zone a lot. And so, I mean, Puka Williams, you need to check him out, because this guy, he was a nuisance to most every team that he played against. He kept being productive. And so anyway, that's one of my guys to throw out at you. Go check out Puka.
All right. I'm typing into youtube.com right now. Puka, Kansas highlights. I'll check it out. I can't wait.
And, other running backs, another extreme there would be another Big 12 guy, Ramondre Stevenson at Oklahoma, who is a bowling ball type. I mean, he will run over defenders. I mean, you talk about a physical running style, and this again is a third day guy, but 6 foot, 230 pounds. He ran a 4.63. He's not a speed merchant by any means, but he will run over you. And some team will like him. Now, as a guy, he's a between the tackles runner, whatever. Some teams may look at him at 230 pounds. Can he grow into being a fullback? And so I'm sure there's a lot of teams that talking to him along those lines. Another guy that's intriguing, Cody, is a guy that got a lot of hype leading into last season, and as a Heisman Trophy candidate. And then once the season got going, you didn't hear much about him. And that was Chuba Hubbard from Oklahoma State. And this past week, Oklahoma State had their pro day, and Chuba Hubbard ran a 4.36. I think people are going to start talking about Chuba again.
Yeah, I actually saw those numbers on Twitter.
Well, he was reported as a 4.36. Tell the rest of the story there.
Well, it depends. It looks like there were varying times depending on clocks that could have gone up to the mid 4.4s or maybe even 4.5, but it's reported that he's at a 4.36. But when I went through some of the running back rankings, I was really surprised that his name was he's like a 5th, 6th, 7th round guy, like you said, a day 3 guy, which was surprising to me because before the season, he was, like you mentioned, a preseason Heisman guy, and people were saying that he could have, rushed for, a couple, 150 yards a game and, really been an elite back. And so when I saw his name really low on the list, that was shocking. And then you go do a little digging, like you mentioned, and he runs a 4.3, and who knows, maybe he's a day 2, maybe he can sneak into day 2 now with, an elite time like that.
He was involved in a little controversy in the offseason last year with his head coach, and y'all can go look that stuff up. You wonder if NFL teams look at some of that stuff. They're very active on social media. You wonder if NFL teams look at that stuff and have questions. How does he fit into the locker room? And I thought at the time that that might hurt him. And so maybe that is why, another reason why his stock was a little bit down coming into this draft process, just through that kind of stuff. But if indeed he did run a 4.36 at 210 pounds with 20 bench reps, by the way, and a 36 vertical, teams are getting back on him, I guarantee you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's he could sneak into round 3 with numbers like that and production, a ton of production there at Oklahoma State as well.
All right. And Oklahoma State's had a pretty good history of producing some running backs in this league too. So
I think so. That
and not just going back to Barry
right?
Sanders and Thurman Thomas. I almost mentioned Tyrone Thurman instead of Thurman Thomas. You have no idea who Tyrone Thurman is. But
a little before my time, I'm guessing. Bill Jones?
Well, Tyrone Thurman was a little wide receiver, punt returner at Texas Tech out of Midland Lee in the 80s. And I bet Tyrone Thurman was 5'3", 150 pounds.
Listed at 5'7".
So he was tiny. Thurman. Yeah, already listed at 5'9".
Right.
Played for Spike Dykes. It not only, he probably played for Spike not only at Texas Tech, but also in high school at Midland Lee, because Spike Dykes was a high school coach at Midland Lee prior to that. Anyway, so that was just an aside. Stuff that you get here that you don't get anywhere else.
You're a wealth of knowledge, Bill Jones. Thank you for that. I'm going to look him up along with Puka Williams, 2 homework assignments for me.
Puka Williams, Puka and Chuba, and one of these, we're going to have to do something on the great names in this draft on a future episode here of Jonesing for Football. All right. I think that does it for this episode. Later in the week, where do you want to go later in the week?
We're going wide receivers. We're going to stay on the offensive skill players. We know the big 3. We know Chase and Waddle, Devontae Smith, the big 3 receivers. We got some guys who you might not know as much about, but you might hear them in day 1 as well.
All right. That does it for this edition of Jonesing for Football. For Cody, young Cody, I'm Bill, and old Bill, and we will chat at you next time here on Jonesing for Football.